Hi, welcome to Library Conversations. I'm Kathy Mansfield, the Library Media and Textbooks Consultant for the Kentucky Department of Education. Joining me today is Dr. Kyle Lee. He's the coordinator for Visual and Performing Arts, but before he joined our agency, he was an elementary school principal right here in Kentucky. And it's on that role that we'll focus our conversation today as we talk about school libraries in Kentucky. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Lee.
Thank you for having me, Kathy. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be able to help.
Tell us a little bit about the last school where you were principal.
Absolutely. Prior to taking this position at the Kentucky Department of Education, I was principal at Hearn Elementary School here in Frankfort, Kentucky. Hearn serviced roughly 500 students, grades 1 through 5. We had 4 teachers per grade level, 1st through 5th grade, as I mentioned, fully staffed, PE, art, music, full library, guidance counselor. So it's a very fun place to work, great people, great kids.
Well, what did you think you knew about the role of librarians before you became a principal, and what did you discover about the role of librarians after you became principal?
Prior to becoming a principal, my only experience or knowledge of school librarians was that of being a teacher and seeing a librarian in the school I worked, and that of being a student and having a librarian when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school. So it's easy for us to form our opinions and our biases based upon what we're comfortable with and what we're used to. I will say that my principal preparation program really didn't have a specific focus on the library or even any extracurricular or specialty area. So it really is one of those learn-as-you-go processes. Lucky for me, I was blessed with a school librarian in my school who was very knowledgeable about how a quality functioning library what it should look like and how it should operate in a school. But principal preparation wise and preparation for that role as building leader, there wasn't a lot of background.
Well, and I've heard other colleagues and friends talk about that experience in their principal preparation program as well. So I know you have started to build some bridges with the University of Kentucky, talking with their pre-service librarians, and you know, I do hope that that will become a part of those certification programs for principals, that they will learn about those quality library media programs. And before I move on to the next question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think an interesting piece of trivia I know about you is that not only were you principal for your school librarian, Becky Nelson, but she was also your school librarian?
Yes, you are correct. Miss Nelson was my librarian when I was in elementary school in Hardin County, Kentucky, Elizabethtown. And it's funny because she was my school librarian, so I experienced Becky as a teacher, and then later on I took the role as principal, not knowing that she was the librarian at the school, and she looked familiar to me, and she's like, "You look familiar," and come to find out she had been my school librarian. So a lot of the good values that and knowledge I have about school libraries and how they should function started at a very young age.
Oh, that's amazing, and I bet that's very unique to a very unique situation here in Kentucky, but I always thought that was very interesting. Well, I know from prior conversations with you that you do value the role of the school librarian. You've indicated that here. Why do you think a certified librarian is critical to student success?
Very often, we want to ensure that everything a student experiences, because we have them only for a limited time during the school day, that they are not only offered opportunity and access, but there's quality behind that opportunity and access. Research has shown, and we know for a fact, that when an individual is certified in a specialty area, more so than not, they are likely to allow great things to flourish. They understand how a program should work, why it works the way it works. And so when we think about, you know, not just filling a spot in the school, but rather ensuring that students have that access to quality instruction or quality opportunities or resources from a knowledgeable individual, we're doing what's best for kids in that capacity. And last time I checked, that's what we're in the business for.
Absolutely. What did you do as a school administrator to promote the importance of the school library program?
going back to Becky, I didn't have to promote it as much as she opened my eyes to what a quality library should be and was. I had a school-based decision-making council, an SBDM at the school, and we had the perception of leadership as a we system instead of an I system. And so Becky did a little investigation about me personally and knows that I love to read myself. And so she started to plant seeds by offering me books and literature because she knew I would, if you gave it to me, I was going to read it. And she actually proposed the very first book by Donna Miller called The Book Whisperer. And it really opened my eyes to the purpose of reading, at least at the elementary school level, what that can be and some possible solutions to operating at full capacity. So she would come to the council and advocate for resources, time, schedule, and not only that, she would bring in with her other teachers who could see and understand the value in the school library because of the partnership she was creating and that open library atmosphere where all kids were welcome at any time to come into the library and experience things. So it wasn't just her. And it wasn't just me. And I'm going to reiterate or talk about that throughout this conversation, but it was the collective capacity that she built around the importance of the library at the school.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure one of the resources that she shared with you was the Library Media Program rubric. That's part of our state guidelines for quality school library programs. I believe you'll see on the screen here the cover page for our Library Media Program rubric. It gives guidance for site-based decision-making councils, for principals, for librarians, as they seek to improve their library programs, trying to make them as effective as possible. This resource is updated every year, and it's part of an overall product called Beyond Proficiency at Your Library, which is a set of guidelines, again, to help those SBDM councils, principals, even school boards, as well as librarians and library advisory councils to take a look at their program and where they can try to make it the best possible. That whole set of guidelines, Beyond Proficiency at Your Library, you'll see a link there to the section of the KDE website where you can find these resources. It includes K-12 student library media standards, the rubric we've mentioned already, the characteristics of highly effective teaching and learning for librarians, and the librarian framework that's part of the professional growth and effectiveness system. So, Kyle, you talked about what you did, or I asked you what you did to help promote that quality school library program. What did your librarian do? You said a little bit about this, but if you'll just go into a little more detail, maybe a couple of examples of what your librarian did to promote the importance of the school library program and that role of the certified librarian.
Absolutely. A lot of times, Kathy, actions speak so much louder than words. And so just through being able to see the operation of the library and to be able to see the impact and the influence he was making on all students in the building, not just a select group of kids. That in itself speaks way more than any research could show us. And knowing, building those relationships, not just with the teachers to provide or be the expert in resources to support their instructional needs, but to know each and every individual kid and what their reading interests were and how to push them forward to explore maybe another genre or continue on their path with their imaginative or imagination, wherever that was taking them. It was really, really great. And Becky did a wonderful job of ensuring or showing that the school library is truly a linchpin. It's the linchpin to ensure that we're making connectivity across curriculum areas throughout the whole school. We speak a lot of, you got to stop thinking in silos, as I'm the math teacher and I'm the science teacher, and I encourage principals and administrators and even librarians to think as the school librarian as the linchpin of how we can make those cross-content connections, because they are such a knowledgeable resource as to where those connections exist. Remember, you don't always have to be the first to do something, you just have to do it different and better, and I think that our school librarians offer us that opportunity.
Well, and I agree. One of the things you mentioned about showing, allowing folks to see what those possibilities can be. In a school where I previously served, we were on what we call a rigid or fixed schedule where students came to the library with their classes on at a certain time, a certain day. And we were able to move, gosh, it's been back, it was 2004, we moved to an open or flexible schedule. And once the classroom teachers and the parents and students experienced the library that way and recognized that they could visit the library at the point of need, they had the expertise of the school librarian available to them throughout the day, they would not go back to any other way of a library program existing at that school. They continue that to this day. But I know that creating a school schedule to allow that to happen can be very difficult, and I'm sure you must have faced that as a principal. Can you give any insight or suggestions about that for principals who may be listening to this show today? Absolutely.
One of the crucial components that the building leader or an SBDM council is responsible for is that school schedule. How's the school going to operate? And I encourage people to ask questions of, is this the best model? Very often we get comfortable because it's what we were exposed to and what we were used to. We get comfortable with saying we're going to have, our music, our art, our library, our PE teachers cover classroom content area teachers' schedules so that we can have like a PLC. Well, essentially, we're putting our emphasis in a process, and we never want to put our resources or our thinking toward a process, but more so focus on people. Is this what's best for kids? Are we taking away access and opportunity because we've scheduled based upon a process, based upon adult needs? And instead of focusing on adult needs, we focus on kids' needs. They have access to the library. The teachers have access to the library at any time. When we build our schedules based upon, as I said, the process, we deny certain access and opportunity based upon scheduling needs, not kid needs. So it's hard. It's not an easy conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to take place in those leadership meetings with administrators and teachers about how can we make this happen, because it is happening and we're seeing great results from schools. So what are they doing and how can we take what they're doing and adapt it to meet our own needs?
And we do have several models around the state, and I encourage school librarians and principals and members of those SBDM councils to go and visit those programs. So it's hard to know until you see it in action, until you can experience what a library like that is. You mentioned PLCs, and before the library I was in moved to an open or flexible schedule, I worked with students during the teachers' planning time. So the teachers that I needed to plan with were in a meeting while I had their children. I was teaching, working with their children. And so we'd have to find time before or after school or on the weekends through email to touch base and collaborate. When we moved to that open schedule and some of those teams began meeting in the library, or I could leave the library briefly to, when I had a volunteer or a clerk, I could leave the library to go meet with them. All of a sudden, I was part of their team as someone providing not only resources, but also expertise in some areas that could support the standards they were working on for their different content areas. And again, once our classroom teachers experienced that and realized how much more support they could have with that collaboration and that co-teaching, it was a done deal. They weren't going to go back to another way.
I absolutely agree. And time is our number one enemy as educators, time. And so how do we know for sure that we're maximizing our time and our interactions with each other, with kids? It is something that needs to be, I feel like, needs to be examined, and we have to be willing to take the first step before we can see any further down the tunnel.
Well, and you mentioned that first step. The school I mentioned, we tried a partial flexible schedule. We did a half flexible, half what we call fixed schedule to get our feet wet, because most of the teachers had not experienced that type of library program. The principal had not. So it was like, well, okay. And then, we jumped in full hog after that. So even taking those baby steps to see what those opportunities can be. And I think folks will be pleasantly surprised and certainly will be able to see the results in not only academic results with the children, but also their love for information literacy, their love for reading, because it can just spread school-wide when they see that library as the central location for those things to emanate from, and when they see the librarian as a leader who is at the forefront of everything going on in the school. Speaking of librarians as leaders, I noticed that you had an article in the March-April 2017 issue of School Library Connection, and it's all about the role of the school librarian as a leader in the school. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you talked about in that article?
Absolutely. So I studied leadership, and from that perspective, I was able to think about who in the school has those natural leadership characteristics that we so frequently try to force onto certain individuals just because of role identification or hierarchy identification. Without a doubt, the school librarian is one of the crucial leaders within a school. On figure 3 in the document or in the article, I really lay out what the AASL has said are 4 primary functions.
And that's the American Association of School Librarians.
Right. And so when we're asking librarians to essentially provide access to resources or collaboration in decision making, to formulate partnerships, and to address issues with personnel, those are the exact things that principals do too. And so when we look at the 4 dimensions of instructional leadership, which is instructional leadership is a big idea or philosophy that a lot of principals utilize, that we see a ton of overlap occurring. And so in the article, I just encourage school leaders and administrators to capitalize on that opportunity, because you already have someone who is leading on a daily basis. Even if it's not a school, it's still a program within the school, who you can rely on to say, here's what I'm thinking. Help me understand, help me work through this based upon your knowledge with your program. There's so much overlap and partnership that could take place, and it's not us having to go out and hire another person to be deemed an expert. We have them in our school. One of those people is the school librarian. And so throughout the article, I just encourage principals to look at utilizing that individual in a little bit different capacity.
I agree, and I often think of that library is a microcosm of the overall school. And as you mentioned, there are many qualities, skills of leadership that overlap in those roles. The librarian managing the library media facility, the library program, sometimes personnel such as a library clerk and volunteers, and working toward the same goals that or hopefully working toward the same goals that the principal is as well.
That's right.
And providing the resources, support for instruction, support for the curriculum for the whole school. So
Yes.
I appreciate the fact that you recognize that in your own school, and I appreciate the fact that you continue to be a champion for quality school library programs around the state.
100%. It's crucial that we have that component in our schools. It's not only crucial that it's there, it's crucial that it's at the utmost quality, because reading is something we will continue to do throughout our lifetime. Whether you enjoy it or not, that's up to you as an individual, but it's something you're going to have to utilize throughout your life. Even if it's not a book, getting online and reading something, understanding the value of what you're reading, the validity within that content or whatever it may be. Those resources are already at our fingertips if we would just take advantage of them. So I encourage schools, principals to do that.
Thank you. Well, and speaking of encouraging school principals, what advice do you have for librarians or principal? Well, let's start with librarians. What advice do you have for librarians who want to approach their school principal about improving the school's library media program? Where should they start?
Although at times it may seem like they are on an island on their own, isolated from the rest of the building or what everyone else is doing, they have to understand the value of collaboration and partnerships. That if you want to build a quality program, it's going to be more than just you as the librarian. You have to help teachers see and understand the value of your partnership and the resources you can provide and that the school offers. You have to help build those bridges with the students on, look, this is a safe place. This is a place where you can dream, where you can imagine and become better, that it's a safe place, right? You have to help bring all those people together along with the parents and the stakeholders to the principal or the leadership in the school to help them see, hey, this is something crucial to students learning. And when we talk about whole child and we talk about what's best for kids, this is what's best for kids. You can't do it alone, and don't be scared to step out and ask others for help and support. I referenced it and I'm going to reference it again. You don't have to be the first to do something, you just have to be different and better. And so look at models that are working in other schools and ask those people, and then adapt that to what your needs are to make it different and better. Don't go at it alone.
Thank you for that. And then on the flip side of that, what advice would you give to school principals who may be a little bit leery of changing the way they do things now with their library?
Change is difficult. With change, there's always discomfort. But we know for a fact that we have to get kids excited about coming to school, and always focusing strictly on two specific areas or a certain area at the school. It's hard to get kids motivated and engaged to come to school all day long or to be there all day long, but to show them that there is another world that exists and that they have these resources available to them, and to take the first step. You don't have to dive head first into what's going on or into a model or a process, as I spoke before, but you have to be willing to change or do something different, because if we continue to do the same thing over and over and expect different results, that's insanity. So look to your school librarian, support what's going on in your school in order to help achievement take place in other areas as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for joining me today, for sharing your insights, your advice, all of your words of wisdom for our librarians who are listening and our school principals.
Yep.
And I hope you'll come back again someday to join us as well. If you have questions for Dr. Lee or questions for me, you can see our contact information on the screen, and I hope you will certainly reach out to us to ask Dr. Lee about, if you're a principal, about his experiences in that role in supporting the school library, and if you're a librarian or a principal, to reach out to me as well for places to visit, for resources that can help you improve the library media program at your school. Thank you again, Dr. Lee, and thank all of you for listening today as we had library conversations. Please join us again for other guests as we discuss school library media programs in Kentucky.